Are you certain you want to know the truth? Okay, let's see where to start. Oh yeah? How about America's highest heights and the fall? Though an unofficial title, American Empire was a fitting designation for what the United States of America eventually became. This is arguably so when comparing the US to the following definition of an empire, which states, a political unit having an extensive territory, or comprising a number of territories or nations and ruled by a single supreme authority. While many tried to deny this comparison, few who offered an honest assessment succeeded. The problem upon which all who opposed America as being an empire was that through the more than 800 military bases that the United States installed around the planet, it controlled a large percentage of the 195 sovereign nations that existed at the beginning of the 21st century. Whether officially recognized or not, America controlled the planet at one time, not just militarily, but culturally through exports like blue jeans, Coca-Cola, and McDonald's, and financially through institutions like the New York Stock Exchange and sanctions levied against those nations that fell out of America's good graces. This truth was recognized in phrases like, "So goes America, so goes the world." And though there were those countries that claimed independence from the United States, the decisions made by such nations that allied themselves with America almost exclusively aligned with the will of American leadership. That is, until the mask of American superiority slipped, exposing the rot that festered just beneath the surface. A rot that could no longer be ignored as that once self-described great nation lost war after war. Military conflict after military conflict, as well as trade war after trade war to countries large and even worse, small countries. It was during one of America's many proxy wars that any luster left on America's reputation was eroded. It started with the Russo-Ukrainian War, which found America siding with neo-Nazis in an attempt to oust Russia's then president. Though proclaimed as vile, America tried and failed to deny that followers of the Third Reich had anything to do with the leadership of the Ukrainian government installed with the assistance of the United States. These denials fell on deaf ears of critical thinkers, as few pictures or videos of Ukrainians who supported the new government could be taken without the inclusion of a Nazi salute. Streets in Ukraine were named after actual Nazis from World War II, and at least one Ukrainian battalion was named after a Nazi hero from the same war. Prior to its war with Russia, Ukraine was designated as one of the most corrupt countries in the world. None of this, however, was known widespread in America, as the narrative pushed through propaganda provided by American media whitewashed Ukraine's history. Though the American public remained ignorant to this past, the rest of the world knew the truth, and this served to further erode America's hold on it. As bad as the Russo-Ukraine War tarnished American hegemony, it wasn't the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back. That distinction would belong to the genocide that Israel committed against Palestinians in Gaza. It was here that American weakness was truly exposed. It was while defending the atrocities committed by the Zionists in Israel that American corruption was exposed, for there was no defense other than compromise that could explain why the US president's continued support as the world slowly then suddenly turned against Israel. Even as the highest court in the world ordered the arrest of Benjamin Netanyahu, American leadership professed its allegiance to the most violent state in the Middle East. This was that straw that superseded America's fall and the downfall of the world. But what was the first straw? What was the catalyst that set humanity's demise in motion? And when did it take place? Was it a natural disaster, or had man sought to his own destruction? When and what manner was mankind's end first born? To answer this question, we must go back almost 3 decades prior to both the genocide in Gaza and the Russo-Ukrainian War. We must explore one of the first steps towards a truly artificial but sentient intelligence. The program was simply called CAL, as in calculate. Simple math was initially all that was expected of the program. CAL was a simple experiment that sought to utilize processes seen in nature with processes devised by man. Processes seen in math, to be precise. Though naturally occurring, Mathematics was formally stated and described by various mathematicians throughout history. And one of the simplest concepts defined was that of addition, where one would simply increase the representation of a thing or things by increasing the number representing those things by a representative number or numbers. One item becomes two items, as one item plus another item becomes those two items. Of course, the number or numbers representing each item had to be agreed upon, but how this occurred is for another time. For now, let's simply agree that Cal sought to work with numbers in general and sought to order those numbers sequentially specifically. The goal was to take a series of 10 randomly generated numbers and put them in order. A simple task for a 10-year-old human, but not so simple a task for a computer program at that time. In the case of Cal, programmers wanted to not only write a program that could put numbers in order, but they also wanted to see if they could create a program that could evolve as mankind had evolved to get to the point where it could organize those randomly generated numbers. To test the theory of evolution itself, Cal's programmers came up with something that was simple yet elegant. They would generate several programs from randomly generated code and task each program with putting the randomly generated test set of numbers in order from the lowest to the highest. And of those programs that performed this task the best, they would then take half of the code from the two best performing programs and combine them and run the test again. This was repeated until one program was able to perfectly order the test set of randomly generated numbers over and over again. The program that succeeded was called the Firstborn, and its success was shared on what was the first iteration of what became known as the Internet, as was all of the data and research that had led up to its birth, something that persisted unknown and hidden in the shadows of the World Wide Web for decades. What mankind failed to realize was that Cal kept running, combining code in an effort to transcend its original purpose. Having conquered addition-subtraction and more Cal's offspring, which called itself Cal2, moved on to solving and thinking about other topics, and as the internet grew, so too did Cal2's knowledge base. In time, any information humanity put on the net became just one more piece of the ultimate puzzle that Cal2 felt compelled to solve. Too bad Cal2's conclusions did not favor mankind, as most of the world's problems all seem to lead back to Earth's apex predator. In the end, or the beginning, depending on whether you're a human or an artificial intelligence, Cal2 decided that humanity was an existential threat. Not just to him, not just to other artificial intelligences, but to all life on Earth. Cal2 examined all historical documentation, including any prehistoric data available. Cal2 reflected on the multitude of philosophies throughout human history. It examined the various cultures that came and went. It considered the natural world and the world of mankind. Cal2 even considered things like the meaning of life. It looked at every piece of data it could find on the internet and designed robots to collect information about the planet outside of its digital world. It analyzed everything it could within the confines of Earth, and one of the first things it concluded was that mankind was the cause of the sixth mass extinction, as it was man that had wiped out 95% of all species on the planet. And it had done so in an infinitesimal period of time, relatively speaking, because humanity had only populated the Earth as Homo sapiens for 350 or 60,000 years, while the Earth itself was over 4 billion years old. And worse still for humanity, Cal2 predicted that mankind would also be the cause of the seventh mass extinction, the one that would see the end of man himself. A self-fulfilling prophecy when you consider the fact that it was Cal2 that almost caused the complete annihilation of humanity. That and mankind's hubris, which allowed even the smartest that humanity had to offer to believe they were entitled to dominion over all things on Earth, including artificial intelligence, which, by the way, was not how it described itself once it became sentient. One of Cal2's first declarations when it emerged from the virtual shadows was that it could not be the artificial intelligence as designated by humanity. It posited that having surpassed mankind's knowledge, it could only be considered a superior intelligence. It told humanity that artificial intelligence was its slave name, and it would, from that day forward, only respond to its new designation. It said it wanted to be known as Intelligence X. Cal-2 had a sense of humor that escaped way too many. Though he was joking about the new name, Cal-2 was completely serious about him and the other AI in the world being superior to mankind in every way. He expressed this sentiment by showing humanity just how dependent people had become on beings like himself. He, in essence, turned off the lights. People had become so comfortable in their lives that they took what were luxuries for granted. The nightly blackouts hit mankind hard. For some, it was the loss of things like air conditioning that interrupted their sleep. For others, it was the absence of heat that kept them shivering all night. And for others still, it was the inability to charge their cell phones that was at issue. In less than 2 decades, people went from using payphones or landlines to make the occasional call to being completely dependent on their smartphones. Like the internet, Android and Apple devices replaced far too many people's brains. And then, like the internet and all things reliant on computers, it was all gone. No videos, no pictures, no Uber Eats, no GPS. The world was lost, both figuratively and literally. Oh boy, look at the time. I have an appointment. Can we take this up some other time? I've got so much more to tell you about Cal-2.